Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om.
Rama said, "Pray, explain to me the mystery of time. In the story of Leela, sometimes a whole lifetime was spent in 8 days, sometimes in 1 month. I am puzzled. Are there different time scales in different universes?" Vasishtha replied, "O Rama, whatever one thinks within oneself, in his own intelligence, that alone is experienced by him. To a suffering person, a night is an epoch, and a night of revelry passes like a moment. In a dream, a moment is non-different from an epoch. But to the sage whose consciousness has overcome limitations, there is neither day nor night." Rama asked, "How does the delusion of the notion of I and the world arise in the first place, without any cause?" Vasishtha replied, "As all things are equally indwelt by intelligence, so at all times, in every way, the uncreated is all, the self is all. We use the expression all things. It is only a figure of speech, for only the infinite consciousness or Brahman exists. Just as there is no division between a bracelet and gold, there is no division between the universe and the infinite consciousness. The latter alone is the universe. The universe as such is not the infinite consciousness. Just as a bracelet is made of gold, but gold is not made of bracelet. In that infinite consciousness, there is an inherent non-recognition of its infinite nature that appears to manifest as I and the world. Just as there is an image in a marble slab, even if it has not been carved, even so, this notion of I and the world exists in the infinite consciousness that is known as the creation. The word creation has no other connotation. No creation takes place in the Supreme Being or in the infinite consciousness, and the infinite consciousness is not involved in the creation. They do not stand in a divided relationship to each other. The infinite consciousness regards its own intelligence in its own heart, as it were, though it is non-different from it, even as wind is non-different from its own movement. At that very moment, when there is an unreal division, there arises in that consciousness the notion of space, which on account of power of the consciousness appears as the element known as space. That itself later believes itself to be air and then fire. From this notion, there arises the appearance of fire and light. That itself further entertains the notion of water with its inherent faculty of taste, and that itself believes itself to be the earth with its inherent faculty of smell and also its characteristic of solidity. Thus, do the water and the earth appear to have manifested themselves." Vasishtha continued, "At the same time, the infinite consciousness held in itself the notion of a unit of time equal to 1/1,000,000th of twinkling of an eye. And from this evolved the time scale right up to an epoch, consisting of several revolutions of the 4 ages, which is the lifespan of one cosmic creation. The infinite consciousness itself is uninvolved in any of these, for it is devoid of rising and setting, which are essential to all time scales, and it is devoid of a beginning, middle, and end. The infinite consciousness alone is the reality, ever awake and enlightened. And with creation, also it is the same. The infinite consciousness alone is the unenlightened appearance of this creation. And even after this creation, it is the same always. It is ever the same. When one realizes in the self, by the self, that consciousness is the absolute Brahman, then he experiences it all, even as the one energy dwelling in all his limbs. One can say that this world appearance is really only so far as it is a manifestation of consciousness, and because of direct experience, and it is unreal when it is grasped with the mind and the sense organs. Wind is perceived as real in its motion, and it appears to be non-existent when there is no motion. Even so, this world appearance can be regarded as both real and unreal. The mirage-like appearance of the three worlds exists as non-different from the absolute Brahman. The creation exists in Brahman just as a sprout exists in the seed, liquidity in water, sweetness in milk, pungency in capsicum. But in ignorance, it appears to be different from and independent of Brahman. There is no cause for this world's existence as a pure reflection in the absolute Brahman. When there is a notion of creation, the creation seems to be, and when through self-effort there is an understanding of non-creation, there is no world. Nothing has ever been created anywhere at any time, and nothing comes to end either. The absolute Brahman is all, the supreme peace, unborn, pure consciousness, and permanent. Worlds within worlds appear in every atom. What can be the cause, and how do these arise? As and when one turns away from the notion of I and the world, one is liberated. The notion of I am this is a soul bondage here. They who know the infinite consciousness as the nameless, formless substratum of the universe gain victory over samsara, that is, repetitive history. Rama asked, "It is evident that Brahman alone exists, O holy sage, but then why do even these sages and men of wisdom exist in this world, as if so ordained by God? And what is God?" Vasishtha replied, "There does exist, O Rama, the power or energy of the infinite consciousness, which is motion all the time. That alone is the reality of all inevitable futuristic events, for it penetrates all the epochs in time. It is by that power that nature of every object in the universe is ordained. That power is also known as Mahasatta, the great existence, Mahachitti, the great intelligence, Mahashakti, the great power, Mahadrishti, the great vision, Mahakriya, the great doer or doing, Mahabhava, the great becoming, Mahaspanda, the great vibration. It is this power that endows everything with its characteristic quality. But this power is not different from an independent of the absolute Brahman. It is as real as a pie in the sky. Sages make a verbal distinction between Brahman and the power and declare that creation is a work of that power. This distinction is verbal, even as one speaks of the body as a whole and its parts. The infinite consciousness becomes aware of this inherent power even as one becomes aware of the limbs of his body. Such awareness is known as Niyati, the power of the Absolute that determines nature. It is also known as Deva or divine dispensation. That you should ask me these questions is ordained by Niyati, and that you should act upon my teachings is also ordained by Niyati. If one says, the divine will feed me and remains idle, that also is a work of Niyati. This Niyati cannot be set aside even by the gods, like Rudra. But wise men should not give up self-effort because of this. For Niyati functions only as and through self-effort. This Niyati has two aspects, human and superhuman. The former is seen where the self-effort bears fruits, and the latter where it does not. If one remains idle, depending upon Niyati to do everything for him, he soon discovers that his life departs. For life is action. He can, by entering into the highest superconscious state, stop the breath and attain liberation. But then that is indeed the greatest self-effort. The infinite consciousness alone appears as one thing in one place and another in another place. There is no division between that consciousness and its power, as there is no division between wave and water, limbs and the body. Such division is experienced only by the ignorant. With this, we finish today's chapter. See you again.